Welcome to week one of Cloud Computing and Analytics. This is going to be an introduction to cloud computing. So this first week is just kind of a warm-up to understand some of the general principles and fundamental aspects of cloud computing. So our learning outcomes for this week are going to be to understand the fundamentals of cloud computing, including the key characteristics, deployment models, and service models. Now, there are 5 key cloud computing characteristics which we discuss inside the text and we'll have in the learning. We're going to talk about 4 cloud computing deployment models, the 3 cloud computing service models, and the challenges inhibiting the adoption of cloud computing in organizations. So the required reading for this week, first of all, is Chapter 1, the Introduction to the Cloud from the textbook, as well as the 2 supplemental readings, Above the Clouds, a Berkeley View of Cloud Computing, and the NIST definition of cloud computing, which is what we're going to use for the course as our general definition of what cloud computing means. So what is cloud computing all about? The 5 characteristics which we'll talk about are the on-demand self-service model that's out there. So again, it's always available, it's on demand, the end user consumer can get access to it as well as for infrastructure resources. It's got broad network access, so as you need to scale up and scale down, you don't have to worry about a lot of network connectivity. Most of that's going to be handled by your cloud provider. Third is resource pooling. And resource pooling is extremely valuable. So in the older way, as you added additional servers, you had to go back and balance the workload of each of those servers. So now what they have is with resource pooling is you're able to balance the workload across multiple servers, clusters of servers, very quickly, very easily, without having to do a lot of recoding or hard coding into your applications. Rapid elasticity is probably the number 1 reason that's out there. And again, that's about the ability to scale up and scale down as your demands and your requirements change. And then finally, measured service. So with separate individual servers or clusters of servers, often you have to maintain all those as a separate set. Where here we can look at the service level agreements, we can look at the stability of the cluster, the performance of the clusters. We can look at that holistically across all of the application or all of the platforms. So these are the 5 main characteristics of what we see with cloud computing. Now it's deployed in one of 3 service models, and you'll see this throughout all of the cloud providers, whether you're talking about AWS, whether you're talking about Azure, IBM Cloud, Google Cloud, whatever. First of all, and the base level is that infrastructure as a service. So being able to provide the infrastructure and the networking for all of the applications and the platforms to sit on top of. That's the hard servers that are sitting out there to where in the old way, you would on the on-prem way, you'd have to manage those yourself. You'd have to buy additional servers as your requirements change. With the cloud computing environment, those are all available to you. And so you just simply have to add additional capabilities or capacity to your individual server. And so to be able to scale up and scale down very quickly from an infrastructure perspective, that's one of the big value points for going with the cloud. Second is platform as a service. So that's more focused on your application developers. So individual platforms, so if you have a suite of tools, let's say, you can make that available out there. And then being able to manage that platform as opposed to having to manage that individually across servers or in your on-prem environment. And then probably the final tier there, which we'll talk about, is the software as a service, and that's really targeting the end users. So an end user could get let's say a software piece such as the Tableau visualization software, and being able to turn a user on, turn a user off without having to go out and reconfigure and set up additional capability out on your on-prem server, having that available to them. So then the individual user can purchase that software as a service. And this is pretty much a standard these days for deployment and implementation of software, is to being able to provide that software as a service. And very often those are coupled with subscription services to where you can subscribe directly off of your cloud in order to use it. Now, in addition, you might hear some other things we'll talk about in the course, such as data as a service or data science as a service. These are variations on combinations of one of these other three core computing service models that we're going to talk about. Finally, let's talk about the 4 deployment models in cloud computing. The most common, when you say cloud, people think about, the most common is the public cloud. So that's like an AWS or an Azure or an IBM cloud, something that's available to an end user to access remotely. Private cloud is something that's hosted on on-prem servers, but using the cloud computing model in order to deploy. Now, private computing or private clouds are very common in certain like government situations where there may be legislation which forces you cannot deploy this to a public cloud, or it has restricted because of, let's say, national security concerns. That would be an incident where a private cloud would be applicable. Now, because the requirements often span between a public cloud and a private cloud, that's where you have this hybrid cloud, where you'll have some of the resources on an on-prem server and some of the resources available out on a public cloud. And so being able to have best of both worlds, that's where the hybrid cloud comes into play. And then finally, this variation on this, the community cloud, that's also available out there too as well. We'll discuss that very briefly in the reading as well as our assignment. So we're going to have the discussion question. And again, just to set the tone for this, the initial posting for the discussion is due on day 3 of the week. Now that's to give your peers time to read and respond back to it. You're expected to have an initial posting on day 3 of the week and provide at least 2 peer responses by day 7 of the week. The post must demonstrate extended thought on the topic, avoid simplistic, I agree, I disagree with postings. This is a scholarly approach. So this is an academic course. You need to have a depth, you need to demonstrate that you have depth of thought in your particular idea. Connect those ideas back to the material that we have in the reading and the discussions, so as much as possible. And the length should be several paragraphs, but probably no more than a page for a discussion question. Now, for the discussion forums, we use a relaxed APA format, posting format, so a cover page is not required, but if you do have references, then those references must be cited. Again, you think the scholarly approach, you should always back up something that you say. Don't just say, I believe, I think. That's personal opinion. You want to have some kind of scholarly support for your position while you're taking it. So in most cases, you'll want to have some kind of a citation backing your position up, unless it's a reflection question where it's asking you, what is your view of this, or how could this affect your individual environment? So you'll see we have kind of a mix of those throughout the course, but that's where the citation section really comes into play. So for this first question, the question is, you're working in a traditional IT environment. How could adopting cloud computing modernize your organization's IT infrastructure and operations? So you'll provide a brief context of your organization. Now, if you're a student and are not currently employed in an organization where this would be applicable, then you should just find a hypothetical company and use an example. So just choose one that could be using cloud or could be looking to go forward into a cloud environment, and select a hypothetical, or again, make one up just for your example so you can demonstrate the point. If the organization is currently using a cloud approach, then it's going to be a different response to that than if you're looking to modernize and move into a cloud environment. So the types of investments that you have to make to go from an on-prem going into a cloud environment, there'll be different challenges with that as opposed to an organization that's currently in the cloud and looking to modernize, expand their cloud presence, for instance. So things like maybe you're on-prem or a private cloud, and now you want to embrace a hybrid cloud with a public and a private type of mix in there, or you want to get into a community cloud, for instance. Those would be really good things that you could pull out for this question. So again, give it a couple of paragraphs here, no more than a page, and relaxed APA formatting. That's going to be the discussion question. Please get that posted on day 3 of the week, and then your peer responses on day 7 of the week. For the written assignment, there's going to be a 5-page analysis document, and I want you to discuss the fundamental characteristics of cloud computing and how they differentiate cloud services from traditional IT. So we've briefly discussed it here in this conversation, but you want to go into much more depth than what we've just covered. Include real-world examples of organizations that have adopted that cloud computing and the impact that it has had on their IT infrastructure and operations. This one has to be strictly in APA format, so cover letter, a cover sheet, and a reference page. Make sure that it's double-spaced. Make sure that it obeys all of the citation rules and that the citations are included in your paper. Again, avoid the simplistic answers. Take that scholarly approach, which we discussed, and connecting these ideas back to the material. So when I say 5 pages, that's 5 pages, not counting the title page and the citations. That's what you're going to need to do for full points. So obviously, if you have any questions, please reach out. We'll have the office hours available to you, as well as the forum postings and the discussion, the help desk forum that's available for you, as well as you can reach out directly in email if you have a specific question which you'd like an answer to. Again, welcome to the course. That would be week 1 for you.